The METUS Tech Show.
Welcome to the METUS Tech Show, a show for HVAC professionals by HVAC professionals.
I like how you guys bounce back and forth between heat pump talk and food talk.
The METUS Tech Show.
Mitsubishi.
So I'm going to ask you two questions. What's your favorite thing to cook? And then I want to piggyback on that is how do you cook for 12 people?
Well, first off, I don't cook. I cook essentially one meal a week. So my wife has to do the bulk of the cooking throughout the week. And somehow she's even appreciative of the fact that I do it one out of all the times that she does it. But it's only once a week. And yeah, I don't know. Like it's always been a big group. What do I like to cook? I like Indian curries. So, butter chicken tikka masala, beef Rogan Josh, all that sort of thing. I don't like making the bread. So usually I'll sub that out to one of the kids. And they're usually pretty good about that, making the naan.
I love making naan.
Do you love it? I mean, it's amazing. It's time. It's a multi-step process to do it right. So, and I'm kind of an impatient person. But then my family actually likes Thai curries best. And so I'm the kind of cook where I don't follow a recipe, or I'll follow a recipe, but what I essentially do is read 3 or 4 different similar recipes, and then I sort of amalgamate them all together. And then once you sort of get a general sense of how you make a dish, then I always just riff on it and try different things.
Yeah,
so.
I do the same thing. I can't tell you how many teaspoons of this and how many cups of that. I don't do any of that. It's just my mother taught me. Yeah, you just know.
Yeah, you do it by taste too.
Yeah.
It's like you just taste it as you go. It gives you an excuse to try it. And that's how I do it.
Yeah, I was telling you before we came on the air, I just made butter chicken yesterday before I left, got on a plane, and my family got to enjoy it. I didn't. And I like the spicier the better. I like heat.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, so that's good. And you have 10 kids. So
10 kids, yeah.
Do you ever find yourself or your wife, I guess maybe, cooking like a whole bunch one day of cooking and then putting it in the freezer and there are your meals for the week?
We have done that at different times. Now it just sort of happens by accident, usually because I have some kids who are out of the house, my 2 oldest sons, and then I have older daughters who I'd never know what their schedule's like, and so I don't know if they're going to be there for dinner or not. So a lot of times we end up making meals, and it just ends up being 2-3 times too much, and then we end up freezing it and having it for days to come. Which is the thing I like. Most of the foods that I like to make translate pretty well as leftovers. Yeah.
And what's your favorite cooking appliance? Is it the flat top? Is it the grill? What is it?
I change a lot. So I was really into the grill for a while. I was really into the pizza oven. We got an outdoor pizza oven in our outdoor kitchen. It's nothing like super crazy. It's just a propane pizza oven. But I always come back to cast iron. Like I use the flat top sometimes. It gets really hot. I haven't actually figured out how to manage that. It's a newer outdoor kitchen. I think I will like it once I get a little better with it, but I still go back to big old cast iron pans.
I love cast iron.
Yeah, all the time. And my wife and I have had to compromise because she's one of those ones who just can't help but clean things. And, the way she cleans my cast iron always ruins it. So I'm mostly using that the porcelain or ceramic, whatever it is, that type of cast iron. It still does a good job, and that's what
We were just talking about that, Steve and I, just a couple of hours ago, how Roland, who retired, he used to work with us, used to be on the podcast, and I probably shouldn't say this, his wife might listen, but he was complaining that he had these non-stick pans and she's got a scrubber and the metal metal utensils on
nuts.
there.
Yeah.
And my wife was going to take the cast iron and she was going to put it in, in the soapy water. So stop. I had to stop. No, I'll take care of that. She goes, well, it shouldn't have so much oil on it. I go, yes, it should.
I know. No, it's like my wife and I, a lot of people know Leilani in the community because she's very extroverted and out there, and everybody thinks she's perfect and amazing, and I agree. But our fights around food and food-related topics are significant, and this is the biggest of all. Like it got to the point where I would hide the cast iron because we have a whole outdoor, kitchen area, and then we have another area kind of in our barn, which is like our little event space. And I would hide them in there so that way she wouldn't get to them, and she'd still find them, and then scrub them and with soap, and it's just big rusty pile. So anybody who's tempted to think my wife is so amazing, I'm top of the list, but. Don't let her anywhere near your cast iron because she will absolutely destroy it. It's just it's a character flaw, and there's nothing I can do about it.
They can't be amazing at everything.
I guess.
Everybody's got
That's
their
what
faults.
it is. Yeah.
A couple of years, I mentioned this before, but a couple of years ago, Blackstone grills were all the rage, and I went to the store to get one, and the guy at Home Depot or Lowe's, whatever it was, is like, well, you need a can of this to season it. And then when you're done, you got to scrub it, and you got to do. I put it right back. I was like, "Yeah, that's not me. It's going to turn into a big rusty mess."
Yeah,
yeah. No, I just got this year, maybe 8 months ago, the Weber griddle, the slate, and because I'm not good with maintenance either. In fact, I'm like 6,000 miles overdue for rotating my tires and. Probably 2,000 overdue for the oil change, so that's just me. But I love the thing. I'm out there, and not this time of year because it's like 15 degrees now, so I won't be out there. But when it gets warm, I'll do it again.
So, Ralph, what do you think of curry? What kind of curries do you like?
You guys are speaking a whole different language. Give me some beef. That's all I'll say.
So traveling with Ralph last week, I found out real quick that he likes two things.
Chicken tenders and hamburgers.
No. Tell him.
Yeah, barbecue. Barbecue's your thing.
Yeah,
I'd never seen him so happy. We went to a barbecue place in Dallas, and he was in his He didn't say a word. He didn't say a word through the whole meal, and he had a big old tray full of protein. It was
I paid for it. I paid for it later that night. But it was delicious. It was delicious.
All right. Anyway, welcome to the METUS Tech Show. My name is Paul Shavs. Joining me in studio, Ralph Wolf. Ralph, say hi.
Hello.
And Steve Pimentel.
Hey.
Steve, say hi. So this is our 100th podcast, and we thought, what better way to celebrate than to bring on our special guest. So let me introduce Bryan Orr. Bryan, say hi.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I think most people listening to us already knew who you were before you even said anything, but you're the co-owner of Kalos Services in the Orlando area, right?
Yeah, last time I checked. I hope they haven't booted me out.
Yeah, no, and I see, Steve, you dug up some information here on him, so why don't you go ahead.
Yes, so Bryan is the father of 10 kids and husband, and I pulled this off, I think, of True Tech Tools.
Yes.
And your wife is a Jedi princess.
Yeah, I don't. True Tech copied that actually from. I have like a personal website that I used to use, but her name is Leilani, so it's like a joke. It's the Princess Leia thing, and anybody who knows her also knows that she's kind of amazing, like I've talked about. Everybody's aware of that. Again, just watch out for your pans. But
I'm sorry, if she's got 10 kids, I don't think amazing is enough.
Oh, right, and that's the thing. It's like, what can you do? And I'm at the point where like I can't say anything. You have 10 kids, she homeschooled all of them.
Wow.
She's active in the community. She helped us start Grit Foundation. She's doing all this stuff. And so, yeah, what can I say? Jedi Princess is,
I think Saint Leilani, more like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I wanted to start right from the beginning and kind of, instead of going head-to-head with you on superheat and subcool, which I'm not going to do, I kind of want to know about your background and how you got started in HVAC. What started it all?
We'll be right back.
Hey, listeners, if you like the METUS Tech Show, you should check out our YouTube channel called the METUS Training Network. That's METUS Training Network. Head on over to the METUS Training Network for tons of videos and programming made for HVAC professionals just like you. We've got technical training tips, HVAC program updates, and episodes of our new HVAC talk show called The Comfort Zone. Of course, you also get to catch up on more episodes of the METUS Tech Show as well. Head on over to YouTube and subscribe to the METUS Training Network today. Now, back to the METUS Tech Show.
HVAC. So I was first up, a very strange upbringing. I was raised in a very conservative household. My dad was kind of a big man on campus in high school and holds all kinds of rushing records in Ohio. And he went to Air Force Academy, kind of had one of those existential crises. And so he wanted to raise me very different than how he was raised. And so I grew up in the trades. I grew up helping my grandpa tear apart airplanes when I was really young. I was homeschooled K through 12, so I never set foot in a public school. And at my age, that was really rare. I mean, nowadays they call homeschooling just school. I think after COVID, it's like half the kids are homeschooled nowadays. But when I did it, it was really, really weird. And so I actually graduated high school when I was 16. I was working as an electrical apprentice with my uncle, who's now also the co-founder of Kalos, and my dad. And I just wanted to do something different than what my dad and uncle had done. And I was looking at college, looking at different things. And my dad's advice was just get a skill that's that you can take anywhere you go. I was looking through a brochure for the local trade school, and I spotted HVAC, and I was always interested in it just because I was a little bit of a science nerd, and I just like how things work, and it seemed like the most complicated one. So I was like, I'm going to go for that. And so I went. I'd already graduated high school, but I went into trade school when I was 16, and that's how it started. At 17, I was in a truck. First riding as an apprentice, and then as a service technician.
Wow. And you've got the HVAC School, which is more than just a podcast.
Yes.
I think people who listen to us probably listen to you as my guess. I know I'd listen, not every episode. Sure. I pick and choose. But how did the podcast start?
Yeah, so I've always loved audio, and I'm an audio learner. This goes back to kind of like I learned how to read through this thing called Sing, Spell, Read, and Write, which is you'd put tapes in and you'd sing these songs in order to read. And I think somehow it just wired my brain to where I'm really auditory. I love listening to audiobooks. I've always loved that. Even old school radio dramas, like I used to listen to those as a kid, the stuff that people grew up on in the 50s. So I've always been into that. As a hobby, I actually started doing podcasting. I had a small business podcast. I produced several narrative podcasts for different other brands, and got really into the podcasting space. Produced the podcast for the big conference in podcasting called Podcast Movement. And in that process, I just really fell in love with the form. And then real life happened, and it's like, hey, you really can't keep doing this. Like, you're wasting a bunch of money. You're doing this as a hobby, and so figure out how to do it as a business. And so I just basically took some classes that I was doing. You guys mentioned the one that I did with my sons. They're both now in the trade, working in different aspects of the trade. But I just did an electrical class with them. I did some stuff with the folks at Kalos and just put it up on the internet, and the response was a resounding heck yeah. And so we just stuck with it from there, and it became a lot of other things beyond the podcast, a YouTube channel and a website, and just kind of spun out from there.
Wow. So what else is HVAC School other than the podcast? Because there's a lot more to it.
Yeah, so the podcast was the first thing, and then we started doing tech tips, which started off as like 2-sentence. I mean, Ralph will remember this when I first started. I just started a Facebook group, and I would just post these 2-sentence little tech tips, and then it became a website, and it just kind of expanded from there. I mean, you remember, Ralph, what it was like at the beginning?
In the very beginning when you first started, that there wasn't a whole lot of influencers or producers out there. It was just a couple. And it was nice to see Bryan bring some more technical stuff, because we were just, back then I was doing YouTube, and we were just doing jobs. Whatever job we were doing, we'd just film it. And then Bryan came along and brought more of the technical, why does this work? Where does the superheat come from?
Right.
How many amps are, how do you get all this information? So it was refreshing to see Bryan come along, because he brought in other guys, smart guys, where we were just dumb guys.
I mean, you were one of the smart guys too. But there's like you and Stephen Raridan and Zach Ciota, and then some others that won't be named who maybe weren't as
I remember those guys.
Professional. We're not gonna name any names there, but yeah, I mean, Dr. Zarkov back in the day was a guy I used to follow. So there was already a good, there was a good amount of guys on YouTube, and there was a good amount of personality in that space. And I created a YouTube channel. I remember the first video I put up, Stephen Reardon sent me a private note and he's like, man, you got a long way to go. Cause it was pretty bad. It was like, I didn't know how to use the camera right and all that. And, I was trying to be cute and it wasn't funny. And still to this day, my humor doesn't really translate on video. My wife says I have a face for radio and I think that's probably true. But anyway, she doesn't actually say that. Okay. That's a joke. That would be kind of mean, but it is also true.
Back in 2016, because I had started teaching at a technical school nights, and for my drive, I would just listen, like you said, to audiobooks, podcasts, and I one day typed in HVAC into Spotify, and HVAC School popped up, and I started listening, and you have a great way of explaining things where it's easy to understand. And I mentioned this before a million times to you, but listening to the episode with you and your kids, and you just explaining basic electricity blew my mind, because it actually helped me teaching, because I had to, working in a facility. I was out of a service van for a long time. So it kind of like brought me up to speed on what's going on in the HVAC world. So it's great. And all the information, and that's something we need to do at some point. We just don't have the bandwidth for it, but we need some website, something that we can take that episode and say, hey, check this out. There's some diagrams. There's you can see what we're talking about, right? Because it's tough on a podcast to actually, you can't show something, right? So, so having all that information is excellent.
So you've got Kalos. You said you're a co-founder. You've got the HVAC School Podcast. And then you've got a website with different articles and information on there and some tech tips. And you got YouTube. We still doing YouTube?
Yeah, YouTube's very active. In fact, it's grown bigger than really anything. And then the social platforms, your Facebooks, your Instagrams, your TikToks, all that stuff. And I know the next question. I mean, it's just I have a team at this point. So like now I have people who I can rely on to do. So, we do a lot of 3D model videos now. We've got one that's coming out soon on electronic expansion valves, for example. And that's a whole nother workflow, and I'm involved in it, but I'm not even necessarily the driver behind it at this point. We have a group of people who, I'm really good at taking things from like 0 up to 2. And then from 2 onwards, there's a team of people who really make that the reality. So.
I was going to ask that question in 2 questions. My next question was going to be about the symposium. Tell us, because that just happened, a week or 2 ago?
2 weeks ago.
Yeah, 2 weeks ago?
Yeah.
How did that start? And actually, for those who are listening who may not know, tell us what it is and then how it started.
Yeah, so it started in 2019, because AHR was coming to Orlando. And a lot of people were coming into town anyway, and AHR is great for a lot of reasons, but it doesn't usually have a lot of the kind of stuff that people come to me for, that more basics, technical, and the community piece around contractors. It's gotten a lot more in the last several years, but at that point, there wasn't much of that. And so a lot of people were coming into town anyway, and I thought, wouldn't it be cool to have a training event where we just get all my friends who I've sort of connected with through HVAC school, have them come in, teach from all different kind of spaces, and just basically shut down our shop and do it there. So just put a tent in our parking lot, use a couple of our warehouses, clean them out, and just do this 3-day thing. And it was insane because we really finally decided to do it in like October, and it was going to be end of January when we hadn't sold tickets, I hadn't confirmed speakers, I hadn't done any of that. And this is just how I operate. And so I kind of pitched it to my team, and they're like, "Oh my gosh," they're rolling their eyes. This is Bryan being Bryan again, but okay. And yeah, we pulled it off. It was a nightmare in a lot of ways. We overflowed the porta potties. It rained, water ran through the main tent. Dr. Allison Bales is up there talking about building science, and there's literally a river running right down in front of him. It was complete chaos, but it was kind of the Woodstock of HVAC. That's how we kind of
yeah, that's great.
That's what it was. Yeah.
You say that about the background, the bad stuff that happened, but the people that attended it, they loved it. It was a home run. I mean, it really was.
Yeah, and it's the thing that that the community kind of did a really good job of right off the bat, because I can't take credit for all this. Ralph always likes to mess with me about being the voice of the industry. He'll bring that up. Yeah. Snips Magazine did this article, and they called me, and I was like, that's never how I've thought about it ever. But what happened so quickly was the community just loved spending time together. They just loved arguing.
It's a great networking event. Not only like I was there this 2 weeks ago, working the table, but during the classes, nobody's coming to the table. So I was going around, walking around to all the different vendors that I know, people like NCI, NAVAC, True Tech Tools. I knew all those guys, and I knew a lot of the people that came. Yeah. It was a great networking thing.
Yeah.
So.
HVAC's a small world.
Yeah.
I'm surprised how small it is sometimes. The first time I did a class in our Los Angeles training center, there was a guy there who used to work with the admin in my office. Like, what? How does this even happen?
Yeah.
It's yeah. So you're probably like the Forrest Gump of HVAC. You know somebody who knows somebody.
Right.
No,
right.
Actually, Eric Clapton. I'm looking for the Eric Clapton thing. 6 degrees of separation, not the Forrest Gump thing.
No, that's Kevin Bacon.
Kevin Bacon. Yeah. 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon.
Yeah. Well, it's rock and roll. It's Eric Clapton.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I want to mention that I think makes it really cool, that's hard to quantify, it's hard to explain, is that everybody who's there wants to be there, and that includes all the speakers.
Yes.
And because any of the speakers who we have at our event could keynote almost any event in HVAC. I mean, that's my perspective. Of course, they're my friends, so of course I feel that way. But they're all sitting in each other's sessions, and they're all talking and answering questions and helping people afterwards. They don't just leave. One of the best examples recently from last year's symposium, because you guys are from the Massachusetts area, Rich Strathui just showed up the second day of the event. He wasn't speaking. I didn't ask him to come. He just texted me that night. He's like, "Hey, I want to swing on down and just say hi to everybody." And so Rich is there. We do a live podcast. He says hi to, of course, all the old guys are falling over themselves because they know him from this old house. And then this year Ross came down, and normally these are guys who get like fees for showing up, or they have to have some other reason to be there. Yeah. And at this event, they just come, and it's just because of the community. It's because the tier of people and the concentration who are there it's a really cool thing to see, and very is something I really, really enjoy, and not something that I take credit for, other than that 0 to 2 thing again, where I like have the audacity to say, hey, let's try to pull this off, and then it comes together.
But you know what you have that I've noticed with a lot of people? So we just had a couple weeks ago, Don Gillis, Don Gillis. He was on our show. And you two and many others, like Ralph is one of them, but you share this thing, and I don't know how to quite put it into words, but you want to make the industry better. Yeah. You're not training and you're not teaching these things. You didn't do any of this for yourself. You just saw a need and you said, I just want to improve the industry. If I can make you as an individual better, it makes our whole industry better. And that, I don't know what it's called. I don't know if it's heart, if it's passion or what it is, but not to embarrass you, but I think you have that, and a lot of people who start training do. There's nothing worse than somebody who's an instructor, and I think we've all seen them, we've all sat in their classes where you can tell they don't like being there. You can tell they don't like what they're doing, and it shows. But just listening to you, I've been listening to you a few years now, and I keep thinking, this guy loves what he's doing, and you don't care if you're helping. And I'm going to guess here, but I'm guessing you don't care if you help somebody who works for your competitors. If you make them a better person, it makes the industry better. And I don't know what the heck that's called, but
it's passion.
Is it?
It's passion.
Yeah.
Yeah, an example of that, I actually taught at an apprenticeship school, Lake Tech, for a year. So I was the apprentice instructor for that program. And some of my competitors, one of them in particular, who I won't name, but was very nervous about the fact that I was going to be teaching my employees there, but I was also going to be teaching his employees. And through that kind of discussion, we really built a strong friendship. And he's still a competitor. We still go head to head on some. He's a good sized business, but just demonstrating to people exactly what you just said. Like, I am happy to help teach your people. Why would I? Do I really think that I'm going to do all the work in this market? I mean, what a dumb thing to think. Instead, I would love to compete against people who have the same standards as I do.
Yes.
And it doesn't need to be like, a lot of people think about monopoly or like, you have some sort of a cabal that you're developing. It's like the opposite. I believe in the free market, but if you have a educated free market where people are actually doing a really good job and have sustainable businesses, those are the types of competitors you want to compete against. Yeah. Not the ones who are cutting you off to the knees on pricing or doing bad work or any of that.
Yeah,
kind of stuff.
exactly. I started working for my brother. It was his business, and we had a competitor, a friendly competitor. And my brother used to say, "There's enough business to go around."
Yeah.
But you know something? If one of us got stuck on something, and we thought the other guy, let's call each other. You're not
way to do
hurting.
it.
You're not hurting anybody by helping your competition figure something out. And I remember one thing I figured out. I even forget what the call was. And the guys called me. We'd been there 3 times. I figured it was something so simple. I can't remember what it was, but it was just a new set of eyes. Is all it was. I could see the forest through the trees.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, something that I picked up on I don't know if it was YouTube or just LinkedIn or just social media, that you hold trainings for your staff.
Mm-hmm.
And did that start from day one, or was that something that it did?
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. Like, because we started with 3 of us in 2005. I mean, that was the business. So I was the HVAC guy. So me, my dad, and uncle started the business together, and I was the HVAC guy. We had electrical and construction. And from the very beginning, I knew that I was going to implement training as part of what we do. I mean, back up a little bit. I didn't mention this, but the company I worked at before, who's a really big player in this market, I was their training manager. I did all their training and hiring for new people when I was in my early 20s. And we're talking 20, 21, 22. I was doing that work. Developed their basic training program. I mean, we're all talking fundamentals here: superheat, subcool, basics of electrical, all the stuff that I like to talk about on the podcast. I was doing that training in my early 20s. And so I saw the success of that, and that's really what I wanted to replicate in my own business. That was what I was really passionate about.
That's fantastic, because I worked for a bunch of companies. I don't know about you, Paul, early in the 80s and 90s, and there was no training.
Yeah.
I mean, you just got in a truck and you were gone. Bad practices, whatever it was, there was nothing like that. So I totally think that's amazing. How often do you hold those trainings?
So at least once a week. We usually have our install group come in once a week, and then we have our service. And I don't lead every single one. So we have Bert, who you'll see in some of the YouTube videos, and he comes on some of the podcasts, and then Dre, who's our residential service manager. We're at the point now where I have to also bounce around. So not only am I doing some classes with those guys, and we have the commercial team and the grocery team and all that. And I have better trainers in all of those spaces than me, but I still try to be involved in all those classes as well. So we have 2 separate functional training areas at Kalos, where we essentially are giving classes all the time.
Do you hire entry-level folks from the trade schools?
Yeah. I mean, we hire some entry-level folks who haven't even been to trade school. It just depends. And, the trade schools in this area, I'm not throwing anybody under the bus, but I think anybody who knows this market knows that it's tough. There are some good schools, and then there's some that aren't great, aren't very good. And so the trade schools can't even provide us with enough new people. But we absolutely hire entry level. We always have. And that's actually almost all of our leaders at Kalos have come from entry level. We trained them ourselves, and now they're doing their thing.
No, that's excellent, because I was wondering, because I don't know if we're going to get to talk about this, if Steve put it on the agenda or not, but it's the shortage of all the trades, not just HVAC, but there's just a shortage of, I don't want to say manpower, but hand. There's just a shortage of people in our trade.
Yeah. People who want to work with their hands, people who want to do that as a career. We've seen a significant drop off in that, but now we're starting to see it bounce back a little bit. I mean, Wall Street Journal did an article about the tool belt generation and how Gen Z is actually starting to look at the trades again differently. The challenge is they may be interested, but they don't come with the basic software and hardware package that we came with. When we were coming up, we had shop class, or we had our dads or parents who were teaching us how to change tires and change oil and what a crescent wrench is and how to hold it and all that stuff. And these kids don't. So they may be interested, but there's still a massive gap in just basic mechanical aptitude that a lot of young people have nowadays.
I don't know if it's lucky enough or unlucky enough, but I've been involved with a lot of workforce development conversations with the federal government and then also a bunch of different states. And one thing that surprised me, and I actually had one guy, I don't want to mention the state or the person's name, but they want how to get more people trained, because the whole electrification thing and the heat pumps. And he says, wait a minute, I can't just bring a guy in for a day and teach him heat pumps and he's a heat pump technician. I go, no, and to explain that to him. But, and I had to explain to these folks, and ACA did a study on this, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. It's but as an industry, we have some challenges. The first one in my mind is that every state does something different.
Right.
Right. It's some states don't even require a licensing. And if you work in a border where you can border 2 or 3 states, you're going to need 3 licenses, different requirements. But another thing is we've had some schools that, hey, let me help you with a curriculum. Let me give you some equipment. We have to follow this special curriculum. Every state is different. So my opinion, what would help our trade a lot is having a national license and a national standard for any trade. Just this is what you're going to teach. Our folks in Canada do it right. If I get a license, refrigeration or HVAC license in Ontario, it works in Winnipeg, it works in Manitoba, and everywhere. And then I happen to sit on 3 advisory boards at schools back in Massachusetts, and 2 of them are public trade schools, Voc schools.
Yeah.
And one of them is so intent on getting this, so proud. Oh, yeah, 65 or 75 was ever percentage of our students go on to college. And I'm like, why?
Right.
Because about a quarter of them are going to drop out the first year.
Right.
And there was a statistic. I was with the Georgia Department of Education maybe 6 months ago. And I want to say, and I could be wrong, but I'm not going to be very off, 46% rather, English is my second language, 46% of the students that go to college graduate from a 4-year program in 6 years. And it's like, and they get all this debt. And I mentioned this in a couple of podcasts ago. I got this a young girl, she's my son's age. She went to a private vocational school for the HVAC program. She got herself a job. She's 19, about to be 20. She's making really good money, and she doesn't have any debt.
Yeah.
And there's I think a hunger for that, because one of the things that ACA came out with is students want to make an impact. They want to make a difference. But you're right. Take away the shop classes and the home ec classes and stuff like that. Anyway, I don't know where I was going with that.
No, it's one of my great passions. And this probably wasn't on your agenda to talk about, but that's why we started the Grit Foundation. That's what that is all about, is taking kids who really, they're interested potentially in doing hands-on work, but they really just don't have those connections. But then also taking tradespeople who would love to teach, who would love to invest in the lives of others, but don't even really know how, other than full-time becoming a teacher. Well, there's a lot of people who just can't do that. They just can't make that decision. But just because you can't be a full-time teacher doesn't mean you can't teach. Or you can't invest in your local communities and the lives of young people who would really want to gain some of those skills and some of those talents. So it's a huge passion for me, and I think you make a lot of really good points about ways to do better from a systems level. But even at the contractor level, we can do a much better job of engaging with our communities and helping people just have more exposure to the trades. Right.
And there's still the stigmatism. People still look at blue collar work. The people want to send their kids. I want my son to have a degree in philosophy and ethics.
Right.
And good luck. But Kevin O'Connor, speaking of this old house, I actually have this thing I presented here, and he has a quote. The trade's 2 biggest recruiting tools are the ability to work closely with technology, which is a lot different than when I started. Yeah. And the fact that technical and vocational schools are substantially less expensive than 4-year colleges. Yeah. And the tough part sometimes is, the government is willing to give you a whole lot of money to go to a 4-year school that you're going to drop out and get all this debt, but they don't want to give you a percentage of that money to go to this trade school here and pick up a skill and pay it back real quick. So, anyway, I'm done with my rant.
Yeah. So did your wife? She had a lot to do with the Grit Foundation getting started.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I was going to start it either way, like usual. And we were kind of in the early phases, and then she ended up writing me this book that basically said her interest in doing it, which was awesome because again, like, I know how busy she is, and we still have. We have 5 kids who aren't even teenagers yet, and she has home educated all of her kids and all that. So I would never have asked her to do that, but she just saw the vision, and she's so connected in the community. She cares about the people in the community so much, and obviously we have kids who are tradesmen too. Our 2 oldest sons are both tradesmen, and our daughters. We have several daughters who might end up getting into the trades as well. Actually, hands-on. Some of them are very interested in that. And so she has that passion for it and has really been the catalyst to make it's exploding right now. I mean, she can't keep up with the emails she's getting. And we've already got some camps scheduled in various places, one in Minnesota, one in Orlando, and then one in New Jersey that we already have scheduled for this spring and summer. So.
I can't even get the laundry folded at home. This is
Yeah,
My wife won't let me touch the laundry.
yeah, that's
So
wise. That's wise.
In one of the pictures from the Grit Foundation, I noticed one of your younger daughters. Was it 7-year-old?
Yeah, 7. Yeah.
Yeah. She was in
She did. She's too young for our normal demo because she's one of my kids, we let her participate. And just to sort of to illustrate, a lot of times people use safety as the reason to not even try to do it.
Right.
It's like, well, you can't give a kid a torch. I mean, heaven's sake. I'm like, yeah, you can.
depending on who it is.
If you're right there and you've helped him light it and you're doing the whole thing and you're wearing the safety gear and you're doing all that stuff. I mean, like, really, what's the worst that's going to happen? Well, I mean, don't answer that. But but like I've done brazing classes in the local public high schools and in their construction programs, and we've repaired aluminum and aluminum coils. We've brazed tubing. And as long as you take the proper precautions, that's how people learn how to be safe, is by actually practicing safe practices. You can't. And again, like this is a whole like parenting philosophy and the whole thing. Like, we come from a generation where your parents would let you play outside all day and they don't need to check on you. We're now that kind of helicopter parenting thing. And I think a lot of people are realizing, man, that doesn't make your kids safer. Your kids are safer when they've actually been safely exposed to things and actually had a chance to get their legs under them, and they actually developed a proper respect for how to do things safely, not by just keeping them away from it. So
the TV only will fall on you once.
Yeah.
No, I give my kids, even when they were younger, I mean, little, like they could barely, actually they could stand up, but they were still in diapers. I remember my son, Tom, he's now in the trade. He's a carpenter. But yeah, if I was doing something outside, I'd let him get involved. I'd go, here's a board. I'd start the nails, just tap him in and give him a hammer, and he'd be out there. Both my kids, I go, here, go ahead, do this. Just start using these tools and figure it out. Of course, I wouldn't give him a Sawzall.
Right, of course not. Right, yeah.
If my wife asks.
Right. If your wife asks, you never gave him a Sawzall. Right. Yeah. For sure.
No, but they could get hurt. I go, yeah, they could, but that's so what?
Yeah.
So I wanted to go back to Kalos. You have a lot of departments. Kalos has made up a lot of. Can you talk about that a little bit? Besides HVAC, what else do you guys do?
General contracting, electrical, plumbing, refrigeration, controls and BAS, parking lot seal and stripe, carpentry, structural steel, welding. I think concrete. Did I say concrete?
Yeah, concrete.
I said concrete. Yeah.
In daycare?
That's to come. It's funny that you mentioned that, because one of my managers said, hey, we really need to have a Kalos daycare. I offer my wife up to do that. I was like, well, it may happen. We have a very unique strategy that would not have worked in past generations. Because the reason why the whole like modern GC paradigm emerged is that you had a lot of subcontractors who were specialists. And so it made a lot more sense for a GC to be a construction manager. And then when you need work done, you just go out and you hire the subs, and there was a pool of them and they were competitive and all that. Well, anyone who's tried to get anything done over the last 10 years has noticed this slow drift where it's really, really hard. The good people are all tied up. And so you're left with the kind of the pool of leftovers, and the consistency, the reliability is really hit or miss. So what we realized is we were going back to the same subs over and over and over, keeping them busy. And it's like, well, why can't we just, in some cases, we acquired those companies and kind of, brought them into Kalos, or why can't we just develop those teams ourselves? And that's the approach we've taken. So that way we really have control over that end product that we provide our clients. And so the GC side of our business really is a tiny piece. But it allows us to capture projects, whether it's for UCF or Universal Studios or Walmart or whoever, and then do the majority of the scope ourselves, especially the more technical scope. So none of those teams are huge. Electrical is a pretty big size team. Refrigeration is a pretty good size team. HVAC is a pretty good size team. All the others are fairly small teams, but they help us execute projects really well. So.
And how many employees are we talking about?
340 right now. Yeah.
Wow. Now, how about the name Kalos? How did you come up with that name? Because I'm a Trekkie, and that sounds like a Klingon name.
Yeah, it may be, and we're probably pronouncing it wrong. So that. Let me be clear here. For anyone who's Greek, Kalos, or more specifically Kalos, is a word that's had a lot of different meanings over time. We were going for the more ancient meaning of the word, which is like integrity or goodness, but in a very big sense, meaning it's sort of like doing the right thing even when it's hard. And that's kind of what we were going for. And so to simplify it, we just say integrity. The reason why we picked it was I'm a nerd. I read a lot of books. I listen to a lot of things, and I never wanted to name it just after ourselves. Not that there's anything wrong with that. But I always liked brands like Kleenex or Nike or Publix, where you don't really know where the name came from, but it just sort of comes to mean something in and of itself.
Yep.
And so Dad was studying Koine Greek at the time, and we just picked that word out of the dictionary, and that's what we went with.
Very interesting. Because the Greek language itself is very interesting.
Yeah, it's a root language.
Exactly. And Greek words can get translated. 6 different Greek words can get translated into the same word in English.
Right.
So it's very.
And that's what we like about both Greek and Greek. So Latin is a little too pretentious. That's why we didn't want to. We looked at some words like, that makes us feel a little too pretentious. Where Greek, it's exactly what you mean. You can pick a word and it can mean a lot of different things, and that's why we like that word. So, anyway,
I like it. I was just curious.
So something that you do at Kalos that I think to me is a dying art is just raw refrigeration, supermarket refrigeration. When I got into this trade, I went to 4 years of refrigeration, and it just seems like all the old timers are just going away.
Yeah,
all that it's just, and I did that for years. But you still do a lot of supermarket refrigeration.
Yeah, that's a huge part of our business, which is what I love about it. Like, I was brought up by old timers in the trade, the kind of guys who would, throw the crescent wrench at you. And they never did to me. I was a little bit of a butt kisser, I think, as a young tech. So I always made the old guys like me. I would, clean their van for them and sweep the floor and that kind of thing. But yeah, I love those guys, and I love that kind of raw, tactile knowledge, that like tribal. This isn't the right way to do it, kid, but this is what we got to do to get by. And in refrigeration, especially in market refrigeration, that's the name of the game there. It's like you do all kinds of crazy stuff to keep stuff running, and you have to fundamentally understand the machines in order to do that, in order to do it safely. So I've always been attracted to market refrigeration. We've always done it to some degree. But we really dove into it over the last 6 years. And since then, we've hired Matthew Taylor, who, used to run Walmart for Florida. He's one of the best teachers in the space, just a brilliant educator in market refrigeration. And so that's really exploded. My oldest son is a market refrigeration tech, 23, and he has his own stores doing his own thing. And I love that business because, just like you said, it's gritty, and it's really you in the machine. About 2 years ago, we were really short on techs, and so I needed to go to I'll just say it was a Sam's Club. I needed to go to a Sam's Club, and they had a rack down, and I showed up in the rack room, and it's silent. Quiet rack room, which is the terror. It's like you have less than 2 hours now to get this sucker up before you start losing potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of product. Yeah. And there's a rush to that I can't explain. It's like, to a lot of people that sounds horrible. To me, man, I love that stuff.
It's attitude.
Oh man, I just love it. It's like, all right, let's go. Let's figure it out.
There's a ton of stress in keeping food from spoiling.
Yeah.
It's I was there, and so how much of it is CO2 that you're dealing with now?
More and more. So we did a complete retrofit of a store with sort of it was a prototype rack at a store up in Jacksonville. I'm not going to say the company because it didn't go great, and I don't want people to wonder why their ice cream. It wasn't because of us. It was just a prototype rack. Since then, we've been doing more and more of it, more and more CO2 retrofits. New stores are going in with CO2 all the time. That's pretty much standard now. Florida's not really ideal for CO2 because not only is it hot, and obviously you have that sort of 86 degree limit where it goes super transcritical. But in addition to that, we have a very humid climate too. So you can't use some of the adiabatic solutions that you can use other places, evaporative cooling, to kind of get that temperature down. So Florida's tough, but a lot of the supermarkets have come up with kind of unique and novel ways to utilize it. Even in some cases, you're just pumping it as a liquid. There's different strategies they can use, but everybody's into it. It's the thing, and it's just going to become more and more.
Yeah, we introduced a domestic hot water heat pump to the market probably 5 years ago, and it's CO2, and everybody freaked out. Everybody, oh my God, this is CO2. We're going to die. It's just like the 410A scare back in the 90s. And it's like, listen, they've been using CO2 for years, and they're using it more and more in supermarkets. Yep. So it's, what about A2L?
Yeah, we've started. I mean, like everybody else. Yeah. I was one of the ones that people would come to all the time and say, "All right, you need to receive training on A2Ls, and we want to teach people about it." And I've probably had. I mean, you guys just finished a whole series on A2L. I mean, I've probably done 30 podcasts on it, but the problem is that a lot of it really wasn't that helpful up until just recently, because they would just say, like, well, just do what you've always been doing. I mean, that was basically the message: just do it better. Before it was a recommendation, now it's a requirement, right? You gotta pull good vacuums, you gotta make sure you flow nitrogen, all that stuff. You gotta cut, don't unsweat, that kind of thing. The reality is we've probably done 30 systems at this point in different stages, prototypes. I have one in my house, that kind of thing. The reality is it's just not that big of a deal. It's much less of a big deal. And I don't want to. People get so mad at me when I say this stuff because they're like, you're playing fast and loose with technicians' lives. It's like, look, if I felt like I wouldn't be saying it. I care about techs as much as anybody. But I think the change from 22 to 410A was a much bigger change than what we're seeing here.
Oh, definitely.
I've said that a dozen times.
Yeah. And basically, if you're super stupid, you could get hurt. So don't be super stupid. Do the things that we've been saying. Yeah. And there's some specifics. You guys talked about the sensors in the last one I listened to. Yeah, you got to understand how the sensors work and where they apply or where they don't apply and all of that. But yeah, I don't see it being that big of a deal, honestly. And
I think it's going to force people to just have good practices, and they get these minimum room requirements and all that. Maybe they won't oversize units now, and it's just, I think it's a good thing. And Paul, you've mentioned this before. I think it's a much easier transition now than it was going from 22 to 410A.
And people are more, I've mentioned this a few episodes ago, I think, but people are more accepting of this change. When it went from 22 to 410A, there was a lot of anger. There was a lot of angry old timers. That's it, I'm out of here, I'm not doing this, but now people are like, all right, so we need to learn more, but there's not that anger.
Yeah. There are parts of it that is going to be a giant pain in the butt, and that's going to be like keeping the extra tanks on your truck, the recovery tank availability. Yeah. There's some issues like that. I gave some of the guys from Hardy heck when I was at AHR because it's irritating how unprepared we are for some of those little details like the recovery tanks, that kind of thing. But other than that, other than an inconvenience, I don't think it's going to be a big deal. The oil's the same. That was the big thing. The change from R22 to 410A was really about the change in the oil. That was really the issue. It wasn't even the pressures or anything else. It was all oil.
I miss 22.
I do too. And again, as a side note, because I remember Ralph and I talking about this back in the day, some of the videos that'll come out of India, Pakistan, and other places where their units there, now it's gone. A lot of people don't realize that, propane is an amazing refrigerant. And it's very similar to R22. So in third world countries, when they can't get a hold of R22 or other refrigerants, they would put propane in units. And so that, I think, is the majority of what you're seeing. And then that diesel effect that we talk about back in the day, it's super sad. But what you're not seeing A2Ls. That's not an A2L. When you see those things going off like a bomb, that's not what's happening there. It's a totally different thing.
Right. So any surprises from Bryan Orr coming in the future? Anything in the works?
Yeah, a lot of things.
11th kid?
I sure hope not, because my plumbing's been compromised. So I've got some, Lucy got some splaining to do.
TMI.
Yeah. No, there are definitely some things that are coming down the pike. One of the things that I'm most excited about that I can say now, and I've said it to enough people, is we are building a new campus for Kalos and for HVAC School and for Grit Foundation and all that. So we're going to have both a new shop, but also a new destination training center. And it's kind of it's right off the turnpike, but it's in a very green space type area. We got 88 acres, and we plan to build a space that can house the symposium, that can do training events, but sort of a different kind of a training facility where the integral systems that all of the buildings are built with are actually part of the training. Where everything's sort of designed. Even we're going to have some on-site housing for trainers who come in and people who come in. Even those structures will be sort of test facilities, almost like R&D.
Nice.
So that we can do some neat stuff with that. So that's something over the next 2 to 3 years that I'm really excited to do and build out, and will hopefully be the long-term home of a lot of the stuff we're wanting to do. But all that can change. We own the property. We're developing it now, but who knows when that will all hit. But I am excited about that.
Oh, it sounds like great. Yeah. I hope I'm around to see it.
Yeah.
So
So
come down here more often.
So with your kids, do they automatically get a service van when they get a certain age? Or
What's funny is,
do they have a choice?
What's funny is that my kids' introduction to the trades is very similar to mine. A lot of people assume that I just drag them into the trades, kicking or screaming, but I actually do very much the opposite. And my dad did the same, where I'm positive about the trades. That's about it. I like my job. They see that. They meet really cool people through the symposium and all that. My kids are always very involved in that. And I don't try to convince them. You know how well that goes over with kids. Right. Try to tell them what they should do. Yeah. I don't even think they necessarily should do the trades. I just see value in it. I love it. I love the people who do it. And that's what I'm seeing with my kids is they, all five, well, my 5 oldest who are working age, all work in the business to some degree. And I didn't ask any of them to work in the business. They just came to me and said, hey, is there anything I can do at Kalos? And they all start at the bottom. They all started as CSR or warehouse worker or, parts trainee or whatever and have worked their way up. Where my oldest son, like I said, is a grocery tech. My next son is a BAS tech who's going to be transitioning into grocery. And yeah, I don't push it. I really don't. I just love it. And yeah, there is this, a lot of people will accuse me of having all these kids so that way I have plenty of workers for the business. I mean, that is part of the plan, but it's working out. But reverse psychology, right? I mean, but I've never forced them into it.
Yeah. What labor shortage?
Right. Doing my own labor.
All right. Brian, thank you. Oh, I do have one more question, though. It just occurred to me. Are you any relation to Bobby Orr, the former Bruin?
Oh, so, okay, this is not, no, it doesn't appear that we are. I've done some pretty good looking, but my dad is Bobby Orr. So that's his name. He goes Robert in business, but all grown up, he went by Bobby. And so whenever we are around anybody from the Boston area, he uses that.
Of course.
And you'll see people, like we'll get off a plane and there'll be people waiting and then they kind of look, they get sad when they see that it's not the Bobby Orr. But yeah, he especially, my dad's a great guy, super loyal guy. Him and my mom have been together for 50 years or whatever. But he is at the age now where he does have fun with it with the ladies, So he uses it whenever there's people from Boston or Massachusetts. Nice. Yeah, I'm Bobby Orr. I don't know, maybe want to buy me a drink, whatever. So we have fun with that.
I once dated a girl I didn't really like for like 3 months because her parents were friends with Bobby Orr. And I just kept waiting to get invited
to get the
over.
introduction. Yeah,
and then I said, I don't think it's going to happen. And I didn't really like her. So.
Yeah. Everything I've heard about Bobby Orr is that he's a pretty great guy and somebody worth knowing. So hey, I don't mind mind sharing the same last name.
He's one of the best hockey players of all time.
Oh yeah, you watch the old absolutely. You watch the old highlight reels. It's crazy. Yeah. I mean, just incredible.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, thank you, Brian, for joining us. It's really been a pleasure. It was a pleasure to meet you finally in person. I have a lot of respect for what you do and admiration. I'm happy you're doing it. You're making a difference in this trade, which is a good thing. So, thank you so much for what's the word I'm looking for?
For joining us.
Yeah, no, but there's a word. No, but there's a word. I guess slumming it.
Yeah. Sure.
But Brian, can you throw some plugs out there, websites, where we can find?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, HVACRschool.com is the main site. Everything's there. The YouTube channel, all of it's called HVAC School, one version or another. Sometimes I add the R in, sometimes I don't, depending on what's available. Those are some other people that I would definitely encourage people to check out. Roman Baugh, who works with us, he has a VRF VRV channel that he just started. So check him out on YouTube if you're in that space. And he's very brand agnostic. He came from Daikin, but at this point he's all the different brands. Sorry, I'm not allowed to say the D word around here. Yeah.
I wonder why Daikin was at the symposium.
Yeah. He came from there. He's no longer with them. I don't know. I appreciate everybody who's out there making stuff. You guys doing what you do. I like I said, I'm a listener. I love listening to this podcast. It's a lot of fun. The food stuff I totally get because I'm a food guy myself.
Yeah, we probably know more about food than refrigeration, but that's okay.
I mean, look, everybody needs food. So there's that. I guess in that vein, everybody needs refrigeration too, because otherwise the food would spoil.
Yeah, we're keeping the service guys healthy and, not so much healthy, but we tell them where to get food.
Yeah, well fed, and that's just as important. So yeah, that's it for me. Anybody out there who's ever wants to, try their hand at making a podcast or a YouTube channel or anything like that, go do that, and then let me plug what you do. So again, do good stuff. I see Ralph shaking his head there, but make good stuff.
It was worth it.
Yeah,
it really was.
Yeah.
Oh, Ralph is YouTube famous.
No, I know. He has people coming up to him all the time.
The sales guys, Rob, our sales guy, there was like 5 people at one time come up, and he's like, "Are you paying these people to?" Because HVAC Jennifer,
right?
HVAC chick, she come up and she was like, "I said, hey Jennifer, I want to." She's like, "I don't need to be introduced to you because I know who you are."
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
See, that's somebody else I'd like to get. The HVAC chicks, they got a good show too.
Yeah, for sure. No, she's great. Does a lot of good across industry, not just women in the trades, which she does a lot with that, but just even her like boiler talk that she gave was a great talk. She's
the tech support stuff.
Tech support stuff, all that.
I love seeing the women, come into the trades, because we got such a shortage of people that we're not going to do it with just half the population. We're not going to help solve the problem with half the population. And there's only, I think, in the HVAC trade, I think only 2% of the technicians are actually female.
Yeah.
So I encourage women. And getting back to the workforce development, we got to start young. We got to get into the elementary schools and start destroying that stigma where people are like, it's a blue collar, you're not going to get anywhere.
Right.
Really. Real quick story, and I keep telling Steve we need story music, but I gave a guy a bill one time. It was a doctor's office. It was a real simple thing, but it was flat rates. It's what it costs to show up in this. And I was in and out, and I gave him the bill, and he says, "I'm a doctor. I don't make this much an hour." And I looked at him and I said, "I didn't make this much an hour when I was a doctor either." Awesome. Anyway, thanks again. It was great talking to you.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. So Bryan, we're Paul and I are obviously in Orlando this week. What can you recommend for
food-wise?
Food-wise.
Okay. So you're staying in this area, or because we're kind of like South Orlando.
We're in Millennia.
Okay. Yeah. Orlando does not have a lot of great food. I'm sorry. It's one of the downsides of it being a tourist destination. There's a lot of options, but not a lot of places that I love. I would recommend Cress Steakhouse in downtown Orlando. I don't know if it's technically a steakhouse. I don't know what it is, but it's Kres. And it actually used to be a Cress 5 and Dime. So if you've seen these throughout the country with the two S's, so that's why it's called that. So it's a cool historic area, really good steaks, and I love their mushrooms and all the kind of standard steakhouse fare. Let me think. Oh, in this area, if you go to Winter Garden, a couple places I recommend. Matthew's Steakhouse is a good one. And then another one is called Thai Blossom. Thai Blossom, if you like Thai food in Winter Garden. Yeah. Winter Garden's a fun place to hang out at anyway. It's a pretty place to walk around and that kind of thing. So those are a couple suggestions. If you get over Claremont Way, I got a couple more, but we'll save that for next time.
And we got the Peruvian restaurant we go to. We got the Portuguese restaurant we go to.
Yeah. There is a really good Peruvian restaurant on the east side, and I can't remember the name of it. But
that's a Pio Pio. It was the one I've been to before.
Yeah, no, I've been to that one too. This one, I can't remember the name of it. But anyway.
And what's the name of the Portuguese restaurant right outside of Universal Studios or near Universal?
Lisbon.
Okay. That's pretty good too.
Yes, that is a good one. Another, what is the name of it? I'll remember it and I'll text it to you. But there's a couple good ones.
I can't say I've had
Winter Park's a good place to go to for good food.
All right. We know where we're going to eat. All right. Take care, everyone.
See you on the next one.
Thanks, guys. Yeah.
Later.